My most popular video to date was last year when I posted a little short of a small mushroom painting I had done. Super ironically, I was very insecure about the painting, but it received the most views and likes and comments of anything I had posted. I was asked for a tutorial, and then pregnancy happened, but here it is at long last, a step-by-step video on how to paint some cute little mushrooms. So first, I started out by sketching some mushrooms on a piece of paper. You can take a lot of freedom here when it comes to the shape and form, or you can look up some pictures and sketch them more true to life, whichever you prefer. My next step is going to be the grass underneath. I'm going to use a wet-on-wet technique for this, which I'm going to demonstrate real quick on this separate piece of paper. This is what it looks like when you add some wet watercolor onto dry paper. The paint stays exactly where my brush has put it. However, if you wet an area with clean water first and add the wet paint on top, it will flow out and spread in a much more natural and organic way. That's the effect I want for my grass, so I'm going to lay down some water underneath the mushrooms before I add any paint. Once my paper is nice and moist, I'm going to add some green. I have a nice crisp line where the ground meets the mushrooms, but then it spreads out below, creating some really fun texture and lines. I added another shade of green too, just to make it a bit more varied. Now before this is dry, I want to add my mushroom stems. This will allow the color from the stems to also bleed out into the grass area since it's still wet, and I really love the way that looks. I'm not doing the whole mushroom, just the stem areas. You can use whatever colors you want for this. I'm going to let the stems completely dry before I paint the tops, just to create some nice distinction between the two areas. For the blue mushroom, while the top was still damp, I gently dabbed a clean, wet brush around to create a mottled texture. For the other mushrooms, I allowed them to dry completely before I added designs. You can be really creative here. I did different sizes and arrangements of dots on some of them. I added stripes up the stalk of the blue one. Then I added a tiny bit of shading to make them pop. For the yellow mushroom, I used orange for this step, just to make sure it was nice and visible. I picked where I wanted my light source to come from, which here is the upper left corner of my painting, and just added some lines on the opposite side of the mushrooms. I then went in with a clean, damp brush to help blend that line and make it a little less stark. I repeated this process for all of the mushrooms. For the pink and purple ones, I also added a tiny bit of shading to the left side of the stalk to account for the angle of the top. When I was done, I took some of the colors I had used and added a bit of splatter around the mushrooms. I used a smaller brush because I didn't want any drops that were too big or distracting. And that was it. A simple, cute, colorful little mushroom painting. I hope you have fun making one yourself. Bye!